support 64-bit virtualized guest systems. So what it is it starts just a Debian server with all these things in the server itself, like this command thing you already see here. It started. So you log in. So when you started the server, you got some IP address from somewhere, or you can configure it manually. So what you need to do first is, what we are going to do is, I'm going to use a normal SSH into the server because it's just easier. Alright. So we know the IP address, and there is this.
Could you ask if people in the back can see it?
Can you see what I'm doing here?
Yes. You can be active in the upper part of the screen.
Better? So, you already heard about this NGSP CFG tool we use. What it does is, there's in this etc directory a directory called NGSP config, which holds all the template files and kind of like helper files. And what we do is, we have one central file where you do your usual configuration things. And this is called config.yml. So, when you edit this, the only thing actually you need to do is, using this networking e-address thing, which is the external address, which is then used by the load balancer and by the media relay for ingress and egress, you just put in your IP address there. 180.129. We save it, and then we just say NGSP CFG applied. What that does is, it goes and generates all the real configuration files for these templates we have. And what it also does is, it restarts all the relevant processes which are affected by this file. So you don't forget to restart like the load balancer or something like that. And the other thing is, as soon as you have done this, it commits all your changes you did into the internal Git repository, so you can roll back later with that. All these steps can be done manually as well, which means you can just create your configuration files. I mean, there's this, if you just call it like that, then you see your command line options, what you can do. And pretty much the apply does a build and services and a commit, and that's it. All right, so the first thing you're going to do then is, you want to configure your zip domains and stuff like that, right? So what we provide on HTTPS port 1443 is the administrative interface for that. So you log in. And then you, first thing you want to do is you want to configure your zip domains, which means you have a server, the whole system is multi-domain aware. So you go and say, okay, I want to have like void.zipwise.com and whatever. So you just need to create this domain. For the sake of simplicity, what we are going to do is we use our IP address we have as a domain, because this is actually what you put in your zip client, and like user1 add something. And since we don't have domain names here, we just use that. There are a couple of things you can configure within these domains, where you say, okay, you want to limit your concurrent cores for users in this domain. You want to always force your RTP proxy for these cores or not, maybe. You allow unauthenticated inbound cores, where you say, okay, every zip client from everywhere can core my subscribers in there, and things like that. Once you have this domain, then you need to create an account. And an account is basically just a billing container for multiple subscribers. One account would be one customer for you, right? So what you have in your account is you have all your billing information for these subscribers in this account. So you can provide like 10 different SIP subscribers to one customer. So one for fax and one for phone and whatever. Okay, what you do here is you just select your billing profile. We'll come to that later. There is an external ID there which you can use in your provisioning to use an external identifier you had from a third-party system. For example, you already have your, I don't know, like your OSS/BSS infrastructure at your ISP, and you maybe want to use the ID you use there here as well. So, but you can leave this empty. So what you have there is you have the basic information about like which billing profile he's using. You have an account balance, which means how many or how much money did this user already spend within this billing interval. And the billing interval, you can define it in the billing profile. It's usually just 1 month, right? And you can also see how much money he spent already, how much free time he spent, because in your billing profiles you can say this user is going to get 1,000 minutes for free for this and this and this destination, for example, and you will see how much he ate up here. And the next thing you want to do is you want to create a real subscriber, right? There are two things. One thing is this web credentials, because he will be able to log into the customer self-care panel if you want to provide it. And these credentials are different from the SIP credentials, because in some cases you don't want to give out your SIP credentials to your customer, but auto-provision their cable modems which have the SIP client already there. And you maybe don't want to use, you maybe don't want the clients to use any SIP client they want. Because I mean, then you have like, I don't know, interoperability issues when they use some broken clients and then they call your support line and things like that. Anyways, so just use test user 1, very secure today. You have a phone number, you can provide one, but you don't have to. But if you do, this phone number, when somebody calls this phone number, it will map onto the subscriber. So let's say we use an Austrian number 1001. There's this alias numbers, we can come to that as well. You can put multiple Unit64 numbers onto a SIP subscriber, because this is like when you want to recreate kind of like these ISDN features where you get 2 or 3 or 5 numbers onto one line, basically. And then you have your SIP URI. We just have created one domain, so you can just choose this one. Give another password. There we go. So what it gets internally is a unique user ID, and this is the one. This is usually the ID which is unique, or it's not usually. It's always unique over the whole system, right? So you have your SIP username domain. You also have your phone number. But what we use internally to identify this user is always this UU ID, because you can, for example, terminate a subscriber, and you still want to identify his billing records because you haven't yet built him for this. So this unique user ID you will find then in your CDRs and things like that. You also see a list of active device registrations, which is currently none, which is your end devices, like this, the devices your subscriber registered to the system. And the other thing is this active peer registrations. This is the thing we have seen before with this SBC scenario, where you can say you want to provide credentials for the subscriber, so the platform will register on behalf of the subscriber somewhere else. So you can use this scenario then as an SBC. This is basically the main data for this user, and then you have a whole lot of preferences, right? And these preferences do pretty much is the feature set of the subscriber, what you can do. What you have is like you have block modes, where you say, I'm just allowed to call this and this and this number, or I'm allowed to call everything but this and this and this number. So you can, there's this kind of, you can change between blacklist and whitelist, where you block everything but the numbers you put in there. Let's say, for example, this is the block in list. So you say, remember this number, it's like 431235, okay? Which is there now, and the block-in mode is blacklist, which means everything inbound to this number is allowed except this one, right? You could change this in order to allow only calls from a certain number. You also have this blocking clear where you can say, okay, I want to reject all anonymous calls. Same for outbound, and the whole thing exists on an administrative level as well, which means you as an operator of the platform can define what the user could actually do, right? Really on a per user basis down to the specific numbers. There's one more thing with how you could control, like control your access control list, which is called, in maybe guys of you who work with Nortel know this, it's called NCOS levels, where you say, okay, you as a service provider predefine certain kind of levels, and in each level he can do this and this and this. So you say, okay, in this level the user can call just national numbers. In this level he can call national landline and mobile numbers. Or in this he can call these numbers and all the numbers from the surrounding countries or whatever. Or he can use everything. And then the user can say, okay, I want to restrict myself just to this level, for example. Then there are a couple of other things like the usual suspects, call forward unconditional, busy, not available, after timeout. You can define the ring timeout for this user. You have your CLI, like the number which is going to be signaled to the PSTN. You can override the CLI, like this is actually the network provided number, this is the user provided number. If the user provides something and it doesn't match like what you what he's actually allowed to send, then he can override it here in the web as well, or he just uses the display name as a user provided number. You want number suppression, like calling out as anonymous, some internal things like area code, country code. You can, with a PIN code, override your block modes if you want, things like that. There you have like your peer-out user, peer-out password, peer-out realm, which means these are the settings. Once you put something in there, then the platform will register this user somewhere else. This is this SBC feature. You also can control on it. You have seen these two already in the domain settings. So in your domain, you define your default values for this user, and here you can override it on a more fine-grained level. Alright, then there are a couple of other features like reminder calls, speed dial, voicemail, stuff like that. And then you see your CDRs as well, where you can just, we have known of course, where you see in real time once you close a call, who called whom and what did it cost and how long did it take. The interesting thing, we've seen domains and we've seen these users. In different countries, you have different dial plans, right? So, for example, in Austria, you're allowed to dial 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, with the 0 something being the area code, right? In some countries, you have to dial it without the 0. In some countries, you say, okay, if I do an international call, I have to dial 0, 0 something. In some, it's nowadays, even with mobiles, it's plus, whatever. The important thing here is, in the platform you have to treat all your numbers as E164 numbers, which mean country code, area code, subscriber number, without any plus or 00 or whatever. And what you can do is you can define these rewrite rule sets. Let's say we're going to use test. And what you have there is you can define for inbound calls to the platform, for the caller and the callee, what happens with his numbers, like what happens with the request URI, and what happens with the from or be asserted identity or whatever he uses. Where you can say with regular expressions, for example, this is an inbound rewrite rule for the caller, which is not that important for now. Let's say for the callee, like the called party, if the user dials, for example, 00 for plus, maybe, or maybe not, and then 1 to 9, 0 to 9, plus, that's it. Which means if the user has dialed some international format, then what you can do is just with regular expressions, you just strip off the first part, you reference to the second one, and then you have your unit 64 number, which is like international to unit 64, for example. Right? The same thing when you say, okay, a user dials 0, and then 1 to 9, 0 to 9, plus, which would be national format. So you say there is this thing, there are some variables you can use, let's say caller CC in this case. It's so what you do is you append the country code of the calling party to the number he dialed and strip off the leading 0. So then again you end up with a unit 64 number. But this is not only restricted to phone numbers, so you could say if the user dials emergency at something or whatever, then you can put in emergency and then write it to whatever you need on the platform, right? And I mean, these are regular expressions. In some regular expressions you could have, like you could overlap this stuff, so by just dragging and dropping them around, you can change the priority on how it is being matched, right? And you can do the same thing for outbound, and where you say, okay, we have an ER64 number on the platform. What we want to do is my client device expects it to be in national format or whatever, and there you can do the same thing. You just rewrite your request URI and your from or be asserted at. And then you go and say, okay, we want to have this for domains, so you just assign it there. So now this applies to this domain 172 something. And the same thing can be done with zip peerings. So for zip peerings you need a peering contract as well, because you want to know your prices you want to pay. And then you put in a peering group, let's say we also call it test, priority is something, something. You have the contract ID, which is this one. And in this peering group, which could be like my Telefonica peerings or whatever it is, then you put in your peering servers. You say gateway 1 with IP 1, 2, 3, 4. Host name we can leave it empty by default. And then you need peering rules, so when to route calls to this peering group, right? And there you say, okay, you can have a default one where just put nothing in the caller and calling pattern, which means every call is going to route it to this peering. What it does in the background, anybody who is familiar with Camilio, it uses the LCR module and uses the facilities they have to select proper gateways based on this rule. And in this gateway, you have your same settings like you have with domain, not actually the same, but pretty much the same. And there you have your own rewrite rules again, where you can say, okay, Telefonica expects my numbers to be in this and this format, and this is what you define in your peering rules, or in your rewrite rules, and then assign it to this rule set. So this means usually in the past, it was like I was having a peering with Telefonica, and they expected this number. Then I changed my peering to, let's say, I don't know, Deutsche Telekom, and they expected in a different format. And what you did is, you did your number manipulation manually in your configuration files, and with this you have it in your web interfaces and in your database. What we haven't seen yet is, what we have seen is the default billing profile, which is actually just a zero thing. So the billing fee, it matches everything, and it costs you nothing, right? And there you can define, let's say, numbers to 49 something, cost this and this, have this billing periods, like 30 seconds first, and then every second is being rated individually. You can also say, okay, if I'm going to give away free time for my customers, then I can say, okay, this destination is used or is going to be used for this free time thing. You can upload it as a CSV file as well, because usually these billing plans will have like, I don't know, 10,000 lines or something. You get it from your peering partner, and this is what you put in. All right, that's it pretty much. There is this customer self-care panel as well. Where you can say, okay, I log in here, just user 1, and let's see. Okay, and this is the thing your customers are going to use, actually. So they see their personal desktop with the last 10 cores or something with the costs. They see how their settings are, like no devices registered, no call forward active, no new voicemails. And you can go and say, okay, these are my cores with my costs, these are my voicemails, so I can listen to them on the web as well, or I can get them by email, I can delete them, whatever. I have an address book where I can put in numbers, and once I put in numbers, then if I click on a number, I get a small pop-up where I say, okay, click this or dial this user, then my phone rings, which I've registered, and it says, like, you're going to be connected, and then you don't have to dial. And the thing is, once you have a number in your address book, you see it in the call list then as the name and not as the number anymore. And you have things like call forward settings, like your call bearings you had, like everything actually we saw in the admin panel, just stripped down to the user features, which the user is going to or is allowed to do. Yeah, that's it. Any questions?